Hello, my name is Gaia. Welcome to my bedroom wall. I'm here to answer the question on everybody's mind today, and that is, how do you draw a fucking owl? So allow me to tell you. First of all, we do need to look at sort of how we approach problems visually. As with any other sort of larger task, we break things down into smaller steps. So for example, I will show you an owl here, one that I've done earlier. You can buy t-shirts of it if you like. Anyway, I shall give you a moment. There is my owl. So how did I draw the fucking owl? Right, so first of all, we break objects down. So say this cup, for example. It's a nice cup. So it's sort of like roughly sort of cylindrical. So if we want to draw, say, an owl, we'll have to start with, now I'm sure you've all seen where, you know, they tell you to draw in the circle, and then you draw another circle roughly where that owl is, and then, you know, magically the next step is that all of the rest of the owl appears. So, I mean, all we're doing is, so if you want to, and first of all, I would suggest that sort of like, it's a really, really good idea to just kind of start training your eye, because you won't naturally kind of, it's funny the way that we kind of perceive the world around us without kind of questioning sort of the shapes and the sort of, you know, patterns that we see. So first of all, it's a really, really good idea to start training your eye and your hand over time. It's a process, it's a learning process. It's like with driving, like with riding a bicycle. It's going to start out wobbly, you're going to be imprecise, you're going to be, you know, it's going to be sort of like, you know, things are going to be all out of proportion. I'll get on to proportion later. This is just a nice fun introduction for now. So yeah, if you get yourself a nice sort of like arrangement of, say, apples are a really good one to draw, because there's a lot of nice sort of like tone and detail on an apple whilst it's still being a fairly simple regular shape. So if you wanted to draw an apple, for example, this owl's going to have an apple. So right, okay, so you've got an apple and you're going to draw a circle. Drawn a lot of apples. So what I would suggest is I would get yourself like a fruit basket with like some apples and some oranges and some bananas. If you don't fancy that, it can be any object, you know, as long as it kind of visually engages you. But the exercise is to, you know, train your eye and your hand. And we'll get into that a little bit later on, but this is a nice introduction. So anyway, an apple is one singular circle, and you might have a stalk there. So you break it down into more simple shapes, and this is what the owl meme that I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with. I will link it in the description. If you haven't seen it, it's hilarious and wonderful, and will teach you how to draw an owl, yes. So anyway, I'm here to elaborate on that. So what happens is you've broken that owl down into the head, the body. So with this apple, for example, we're going to add some more apple shape to it. Excuse me, my stick of graphite. I prefer to have some charcoal, but I only have graphite. Charcoal would be more visible, but also I kind of store all of my art materials in a box, and all of the charcoal kind of just ends up in the bottom, and it's just kind of become a powder. Don't be me. Have an organised art. Don't be me. Right, okay. I did not plan ahead. I don't tend to use charcoal an awful lot in my work. I prefer to use ink or digital, mainly digital, because it's clean and it doesn't end up in the bottom of a box turning to kind of sort of dusty powder. Anyway, yes, the apple. So yeah, as you can see here, we're starting to add a little bit more detail to the apple. We're getting that apple shape. We're using that kind of circle as a kind of framework for our apple. And then we might say, so maybe there's some light over here. I don't want to get too far ahead, but there's a little light bulb. That's a shit light bulb. And you'd say, oh, there's some light there, and some shadow there. You know, and there's a basic apple. So, right, all we're doing with the owl, so when it says draw the rest of the fucking owl, so we've got the basic shape of the owl here, we've got the head, and then you might want to kind of sort of maybe chop that into a little cake, cut it into 4 slices, and where it's going to meet. So we've got the owls have these kind of sort of like facial discs. So they're actually quite a nice thing to draw because they've got lots of, like a human face, they have lots of nice reference points, and I'll get onto human faces. They're not as scary as you might think. I started out sort of with sort of natural history, and you know, I used to be really frightened of sort of like human faces when I started sort of life drawing and things, and they're not as scary as you think. The main thing is that they have a lot of expressions, but they've got lots of nice reference points, and we can sort of go into that a little bit later on down the line. But yeah, an owl is similar. They've got lots of nice reference points. So you cut it into quarters, and then you kind of draw maybe a triangle at the top. And why I kind of encourage a little bit of sort of like, you know, drawing from life, drawing some still life, is it gets you to kind of, so don't think that this is a hard and fast way to draw an owl. A lot of people kind of get a bit confused when they sort of read these kind of sort of how to do books. They kind of think they're sort of like, okay, if I draw a circle and I chop that circle up, and if I put a circle here and a circle here and then and like, you can do that. I mean, one of the things that I love about art is that it's problem solving, and you can approach it any way that you like. No way is really wrong, as long as it's kind of effective in some kind of way. Depends what you find in it. It's where kind of sort of like you can just have this fun sort of play space, and you can kind of find out what does and doesn't work. But anyway, with the owl, so yeah, I would encourage a little bit of sort of like, yeah, get yourself some interesting objects. If you've got some, like, you know, wibbly desk toys, or you've got something that's kind of visually interesting and you can break down into smaller objects, like smaller sort of shapes. So you break things down into their basic shapes in order to build a framework to then finish the, you know, you build the finished piece upon that framework, which is what we're doing here with the owl. So we've built this framework here with the face, and we've got like a little triangle at the top, and right about the middle is where you'll get the beak. So there's his little beak, and then kind of sort of here you'll get the eyes. There you go, there's his eyes. And sort of around here you've got kind of what will be where the wing is. And again, particularly with sort of animals are lovely subjects to draw. They don't tend to stay still, unfortunately. So if you've got a pet, so my little cat at the moment, she's curled up sleeping. She'd be a lovely subject. She's very round. I would show you, but my rig is far too precarious to really, and I don't want to disturb it too much. She's having a lovely nap. Anyway, so yeah, if you've got a pet that's kind of used to your presence, and you've got a dog that's kind of sleeping by the fire, or a cat that's curled up in a nice kind of circle, they're always a lovely subject to draw. And yeah, so basically what we're doing is we are breaking things down into basic shapes. So we've got that circle, we've got that oval, and this is building a framework for our finished piece. So, okay, so we've got that half moon there where the wing will be. It's got that big plump oval body. And then we'd have like a wedge here where the tail would be. And then you can kind of put the feet in. And it's just kind of sort of finding reference points. And like, again, I've trained my eye over time. It's something that I've been doing for years and years and years. And, you know, don't worry if your first attempts are dreadful. They will be. That's not the point. So, you know, you want to get yourself a sketchbook, and that will be your working sketchbook. So what's in that sketchbook won't be pretty or presentable or nice or anything that you can put in a book. So a lot of what people find quite intimidating about these how to draw books is that they are full of, you know, even the sketches are finalised, polished, finished, presentable pieces. Your sketches will probably look like garbage. My sketches, a lot of them still look like garbage because they're working sketches. You're working at this like you're mathematical. So, you know, if you've got sort of a sort of like notebook for work and you've just been like doodling sort of like numbers and sort of like kind of doing some mathematical working out, it's kind of that. It doesn't look pretty. It's not meant to. It's for you to kind of train your eye, train your mind, kind of visually problem solve,
And your sketches, I would be surprised if they did look pretty. You might want to go off on one on a page or two and just do something nice. You see a lot of these sort of like, you know, you've got on Pinterest or Instagram, a lot of these kind of display sketchbooks that just look really intimidating, and they're like, whoa, okay. And they are cool. They are cool. I'm not putting them down at all. They are cool. And if that's what you want to do in your sketchbook, go off king or queen or creature of the beyond. So, yeah. Don't be intimidated by the lovely, polished, presented, or the kind of sort of like, you know, purposely sort of like, wow, that's so sort of like creative and chaotic, and they've absolutely gone off on one. Your sketchbook doesn't have to look like that. It can just look like the artistic equivalent of sort of your notebook at work, where you've got some doodles and sort of like, you know, scribblings and sort of mathematical workings out. That's basically the same sort of thing. So you can do that. They are impressive. Mine doesn't look like that. Mine look like, they look like garbage. Unless there's sort of like, you know, a particular subject on a particular page that I've just gone off on one, and I've like, oh, I'm going to play with these colours and stuff. Do that as well. Do just play. I want to encourage just playing about. That's what art is for. Don't expect it to look nice. It probably won't. But if you do want to go off on one and just have fun, absolutely do that. That's how you kind of find things that do work for you, and how you find how you work. But yeah, so anyway, back to this owl. That was a huge tangent. Right. So there's his tail, there's his leggies, we've got his feet here, we kind of half circles. You might want to join his head up here to the rest of the body. And put this down because it's heavy. Right, I am going to switch, because that doesn't register very well on camera. I need a heavier marker pen. So, right, we have the framework for our owl, and now we're going to start building in the owl. And this is where reference work. Go to a zoo, sketch your pet parrot, you know, go out and sketch pigeons. Pigeons are great to sketch, they're so much fun. Yeah, go out, get out there in the world. Cafe sketching is a lovely way to spend an afternoon if you just want to get yourself out of the house, which is really important. Just, you know, bring your sketchbook with you, go grab a nice cup of coffee. Cafes always have lovely objects scattered around. If you're at a loss for things to draw at home, and you're just not, fruit is not doing it for you, which is fair, it's the go-to thing because they are nice. You know, you can break them down, like with the apple, into nice basic shapes basically. But if you want some interesting things to draw, cafes are always full of interesting objects to kind of sort of build an environment and just like build an atmosphere. So they're brilliant places to sit and draw the lampshades, draw the candles. If you want to annoy the clients, do have some tact. If somebody's uncomfortable, you know, maybe kind of sort of move on to like, you know, oh, that's a nice painting over there, or a nice pumpkin, or a nice, you know, but yeah, no, generally sort of like, you know, they're nice spaces, they're full of interesting things to draw. If people are comfortable with you drawing them, do be tactful, do be respectful, but yeah, I mean, they are good places to kind of sort of get some action sketches of people sort of in their environment. Brilliant places. Get yourself out in the cafe, sketching, gets you out, starts conversations as well. Really good way to meet new friends, meet new people. Yeah, so anyway, that's my little bit about sketchbooks and getting out and making sure that you are kind of sort of like building up that kind of visual library. Back to the owl. So, built up our framework for the owl, as you can see. So he's made out of basic shapes here. So what we can do is we can draw in, so this will be his little facial disc. And his wing will come up here. So it'll kind of have some feathers. Bird of Prey Centre, if you've got anything like that nearby, Botanical Centre. Basically, your sketchbook will be a really good excuse for you to get out and have an excuse to see things, even if you've sort of like, you know, you've got a day off and like all of your mates, they've got a cold or they're busy or they're like, no, I don't really want to do anything today. You can go out with your sketchbook. It's kind of sort of like, you know, how some people sort of like, you know, it's kind of an excuse to have a dog, it's kind of an excuse to go for a walk. You know, dogs are lovely companions to go for a walk with. Your sketchbook is a really, really good excuse to go to the park, go to the cafe, go, you know, go to the botanical centre, anything like that, go to the museum. Museums are amazing places to go draw. I just like museums in general because like they're one of those really nice, quiet, you know, quiet spaces that you can kind of just relax around people and just, you know, kind of do your thing and sort of like get your sketchbook out and do some sketching, and they're full of wonderful objects and you'll learn something as well. I love museums. You should do that. But yeah, your sketchbook will be not only sort of a place where you can explore and express yourself and kind of sort of like, you know, build that kind of visual library and that visual understanding of the world, but it's also a wonderful excuse if all your mates are being boring to go out and do something. So we're going to finish off this owl. So there's his wing, there's his little tail, and like you don't have to follow these steps in any particular order. You know, it's kind of what works for you and what flows for you. There's his little feeties. And I've had a little bit of practice. I particularly like birds. I think birds are just, I mean, they're so fancy, and there's all sorts of like pigeons. Like everybody overlooks pigeons. They're absolutely wonderful. They come in all sorts of patterns and colours and different types of feathers. Chickens, I love chickens. Go to, if you've got a local farm, go draw some chickens. They're really friendly and sweet, and they do like the attention as well. I do quite like chickens. I used to own some as a kid, so anyway, sorry for the tangent. There's his little feet. There we go. And so we're going to finish off his head here. So we're just using this framework. So we're just using the framework that we've built to fill in the detail for us. So it's kind of like if you're, you know, trying to build a building, you first of all put up some scaffolding, and this is what this is for our owl. So we've built up a framework out of basic regular shapes that'll kind of give us a sort of, you know, a much more sort of like regular, structured sort of like, you know, basis to work from. So we've built the foundations of the owl, and now we're drawing the rest of the fucking owl, which will be much easier now that we've built these foundations for the owl. So there we go. And if you are, sort of quick side tangent, if you are wondering what these facial discs are, they're kind of the feathery equivalent of our kind of earlobes. So an owl's ears, they're slightly offset, which is something that's quite odd about them, but it gives them a better sort of like depth perception with their hearing. So they're similar to how we have sort of like forward-facing eyes. Owls also do have forward-facing eyes. They can also see in the dark, but they can also hear really well. They're like radar dishes. So similar to how our ears are kind of like fleshy radar dishes, these are kind of feathery radar dishes for the owl's ears, which will be at different heights because that actually helps them triangulate where the sound is a little bit better. But yeah, so there will be a kind of a sort of like, you know, buried underneath all those feathers, there'll be their little ears kind of buried under all that fluff. And yeah, so this facial disc, this kind of iconic sort of round face that gives them quite a personable, sort of like human quite sort of face. It makes them quite cute and relatable, that's why we love them. But yeah, those are basically feathery radar dishes for their ears, in a similar manner to how we have fleshy radar dishes for our ears so we can hear a bit better. Anyway, so, right. There's his little beak there. There's his eyes. We can put a bit of light there.
then sort of, you know, from here on out you can get some, you know, you can get some paints, you can get some pencils. And now that we've drawn our lovely owl, as you can see, we have built the foundations for the owl, and then we have gone in and we have kind of filled in the detail for the owl, and now we've got a nice, regular, structured, lovely owl that, you know, we could try and you know, a lot of artists kind of skip this process. The thing is, with art, you know, you can kind of approach things how you like. So, I mean, a lot of artists will just kind of sort of skip this step, but it's a really, really good kind of habit to get yourself into, is to start building that kind of sort of like structure and that framework. And sort of, some people will just go in there, especially sort of people who are a bit more expressionistic with their, you know, like Turner's a really good example. Turner just goes in there with the paints, and you can sort of like, it's less about the structure and more about the atmosphere that he creates. He's one of my favourite artists, if you couldn't tell. But you know, with sort of somebody who's a bit more expressionistic, they might just get in there with the paints, or, you know, the colours or whatever pigments they're using. However, for people who are starting out, who want to kind of sort of like learn how to kind of sort of represent the world around them, and might be a bit intimidated by just kind of sort of going in there and just kind of sort of freehanding it, it's a really, really, really good tool to be able to break objects down into their basic shapes. Like with the apple, we just started with a circle and we filled it in from that circle with that kind of apple shape. Here we go. So yeah, it helps to, like with a mathematical problem, like with any kind of problem that you're trying to solve, you break it down into simpler steps. You kind of build that framework, you kind of build that foundation, and the result is that we have built the foundations for our owl here out of basic shapes, out of a circle and an oval and a couple of lines, and, you know, a bit of a half circle there. And then from there we were able to fill in the detail to create a very, you know, balanced, regular, plausible looking owl, like, I hope anyway. So that's been my video. I hope you found this useful. I hope you found this helpful. If you enjoyed it, like and subscribe. I will be doing more. I've got nothing else to do with my spare time, so I might as well tell you how to draw, you know, owls and apples and sort of like, you know, I mean, this is what I've studied in, and I'm passionate about it, and I want to kind of share this kind of with people. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting and useful. And yeah, so that is how you draw a fucking owl. Goodbye.